I'd like to officially call the regularly scheduled Planning and Traffic Commission meeting of January 11th to order. Thank you. And let us, the record reflect that all planning and traffic commissioners are in attendance tonight. And if Commissioner Armando would lead us in the pledge.
Please stand. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Is anyone here to address? I bet I know who it is.
Heiko Bichel.
Good evening, ma'am, and her fellow commissioners. Heiko Peschel for Perel Avenue, Foothill Ranch. Oops, let me get the notebook.
Don't start his time yet. We want to hear
It doesn't
everything.
matter. The first one is not the long one. The second one will be. So I thought for some strange reason, like council meetings, these started at 6:30. So I was here at 6:20. When I found out they weren't, by checking at home, I went over and hit the neighborhood liquor store to get a bottle of wine, which I found a very nice Cabernet called B-Side. But on the way back, I saw Fabricante Auto Body sign, bright neon sign on Dimension between Kenyatta and Lake Forest. That thing stands out like a sore thumb out there. And that's all I want to say about that subject.
Did you have the wine before you saw this neon sign? Oh, okay.
It's still full in the trunk of the car where it should be.
I just was making sure
No.
that there wasn't an impairment.
I know the neighborhood. I know several people who have shops there, and I hadn't seen that one before, mostly because I normally don't go through there at night. But that stands out as much as anything else in that whole neighborhood. Anyway, neither here nor there. Mostly planning and all of that wonderful stuff. I've been on vacation, so I haven't been kept up to date with anything that's going on. And Mr. Rogers tells me he's going to talk to us about traffic and how to handle traffic and all that stuff, so I'm eager to learn. So we'll make this one quick. Happy 2018. Thank you.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to you, too. Welcome back. Are there any others? Okay, so with that, we're going to go into, we do not have presentation. We will go to our consent calendar. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded, and let's vote. Motion carries unanimously. All right, so we are going to go right into our public hearing and open the public hearing. And we'll call on Gail Ackerman to get us started.
Okay, our first item this evening is site development permit and plan sign program for the Heritage Hill Plaza Shopping Center facade remodel. And Amanda Loffer has a staff report this evening.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. The item before you tonight is a site development permit and plan sign program for the Heritage Hill Plaza Shopping Center located at 21731 Lake Forest Drive. The site development permit includes a facade remodel for the shopping center buildings and landscape renovations. The Heritage Hill Plaza Shopping Center is comprised of 5 multi-tenant buildings and 1 single-tenant building that is currently occupied by U.S. Bank. While the overall shopping center is managed by the same property management company, the parcel with the U.S. Bank building is separately owned. The proposed remodel for the U.S. Bank building is included with the rest of the shopping center remodel. However, because it is separately owned, the proposed time frame for the remodel is unknown. In the future, the tenant can remodel the building according to the plans submitted under this application. As shown in the proposed plans, the building facade remodel will feature natural stucco colors, natural stone, and horizontal and vertical wooden slats along specific elevations. The existing wooden overhangs will be removed to create a more modern and open appearance, and the buildings along Lake Forest Drive and Trabuco Road street frontages will feature additional wood and stone accents to enhance the street frontage. Lastly, the site development permit includes landscape improvements along the street frontages and throughout the parking lot. Specifically, more shrubs and ground cover will be added along the street frontages and throughout the parking lot. The existing mature pine trees along the street frontages will remain in place. This application also includes a planned sign program for the shopping center. The planned sign program establishes regulations for shopping center monument signs and tenant wall signage. 3 shopping center monument signs are proposed under this application, including 2 along the Lake Forest Drive street frontage and 1 along the Trabuco Road street frontage. In addition, an office directory monument sign is proposed along the interior of the center and will not be visible from the street. As shown in the staff report, the monument signs will feature a wood accent that is similar to those shown on the proposed facade remodels. The planned sign program also proposes regulations for tenant wall signage. The wall sign regulations are consistent with those in the sign code, and the signage will not interfere with the proposed architectural elements on the newly remodeled buildings. The subject site development permit and planned sign program will help to modernize an older shopping center while still maintaining the rustic character of the neighborhood. The site development permit and planned sign program for the Heritage Hill Plaza meet all zoning code requirements and are consistent with the citywide design guidelines. Therefore, staff is recommending approval of the planned sign program and site development permit, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have, and the applicant is also in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. All right, does anybody have any questions of staff? I see no questions. Amanda, you must have done a great job. All right, do we have any public speakers tonight? No. All right. How about possibly hearing from the architect?
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission and everyone. My name is Sammy Saludo with Architects Orange, and we are the architects of the project, and I'll be happy to answer any questions about the architecture of the project.
Is that the board there?
Yes, it's the materials board.
Would you mind just bringing that up? Does anybody have any questions of the architect?
Although we don't know the time frame, but when the bank decides to do their remodel, are you guys going to be doing that as well? Are you design that, or they?
We would be happy to do that.
Well,
So,
okay. So, I guess maybe that's for staff though too. The plans they're submitting, the bank plans, and that'll be all approved theoretically, and when they get ready, they can't change. They won't be changing anything. The way they say that is how it's going to be.
Yeah, the proposed modifications to the U.S. Bank building are more minor in nature, so they're anticipating that the U.S. Bank tenant is going to go forward with the proposed modifications, but the exact time frame of that is not known because it's not owned by the same owner.
Okay.
So I had a question for the architect. Thank you. So I see that we're getting rid of the sloped roof, and which I think probably gives that woodsy feel. And I see that we're going to a little more flat roofed and certainly a little more modern look. Can you tell us a little bit about where you came? What drew you to your final drawings?
Sure. Actually, we're not getting rid of all the slope roofs. I believe there's some slope roofs that are keeping at the CVS as well as the Ralph's Market. The concept really was just to upgrade and make the shopping center more contemporary, but also we feel that by doing that also keeping the warm tones, the colors, and the materials make it a better looking shopping center, more modern. But as I said, we're not getting rid of all the slope roofs.
Thank you. Maybe Tom has a question?
I know right now the CVS and the Ralph store that it's up there in that location. The sidewalks in the front of those two stores are kind of a hodgepodge. Are they going to do anything to try and remedy that so it looks like a little more?
Yeah, we will do whatever is necessary to repair whatever cracked, sidewalks and, so we'll propose to repair all those necessary items.
Because it kind of looked like the ADA they had installed there was sort of an afterthought, and it was kind of, it just doesn't look very good. To me, if you're going to remodel the center, you need to fix the sidewalks and make that a more contiguous, because the
Absolutely.
elevations change a lot. And looks like you have somebody else that may want to talk about that too. But
How you doing?
that's something, I go there a lot, so I'm quite familiar with walking up and down that area.
I understand what you're saying, and my name is Kane Sautel. I represent the property owner, and we've looked at that in other site conditions as well. And part of the plan is to kind of make it all consistent throughout. So we will be addressing that area specifically from an ADA perspective as well as an aesthetic.
Thank you.
I do have a couple of questions.
And one more item about the facade and the architecture. One item that kind of helps with the modern architecture is all the signage. Right now, all the signage has raceways, big junction box on the backside of the signage, just because of the nature of the architecture and how it resides. But if we have essentially a new wall with nice stone or wood material on it, then you won't see any of that exposed raceway conditions any longer. So we feel that's a plus and an added benefit as well.
So are most of the tenants now going to change their signage based on the remodel?
I have to.
Yeah, we will work with them comprehensively to basically install new signage that works with the architecture and the new.
I think the
design sign.
report said if they take one down, a new one's got to go up.
Yep,
No, it's
It looks like a lot of them are going to go down.
there's going to be a lot of new signs.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
because notice the way they phrased that. Almost everybody would have to get a sign the way you phrased it.
Majority of them will have new signage that works with the architecture better.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Mr. Carter has a question here.
I do have a question. Okay, you say you've stayed with the rustic character of the area. I don't see anything in the design whatsoever that is rustic, with maybe the exception of the color tones.
The color tones, the material, which is like the stone as well as the wood materials.
Yeah, but that doesn't, in my mind, what I'm concerned with, when we take out the hip and the gable, which is the overhangs, you're taking away the character of the center. This totally changes the design of that particular area. It's immediately adjacent to Heritage Park, which is there for a historical preservation type of a thing, if you will. And what I see, we've totally diverted ourselves away from the character of that particular area. And that concerns me terribly. We've lost a lot of character. I know it's old. It's not a contemporary. We've gone very contemporary on the design. Okay. But we've lost a lot, in my mind. I don't see anything that ties in with the pine trees. Just the character of the center is totally modified. And I'm curious how that ties into our design guidelines for the Dubuque Road, because I know we specifically identified those for that particular area, and trying to keep that conformance with what we feel is in that area. As we come up Lake Forest from the freeway, it goes from a less contemporary to a more wooded area. Within that wooded area, you have Serrano Creek, you got Serrano Heritage Park, all which is extremely rustic. Immediately adjacent, you've got the stables. Okay, so it is, and we've got all the trails and stuff that go through there. So I have a very, very, very hard time figuring out how the architecture of that ties into that particular area. I think we're trading away a tremendous amount that loses character. And it's the same thing with the signage. The signage, to me, is reflective of what have always tried to stay away from. I looked at it, I just couldn't figure out what it was that bothered me about it. But I see the sign. Okay, that's what signs are for, I guess. But you don't give away the architecture of the building for the sign. And that's what I perceived, and that's the hardest thing I've got. I mulled over this thing for quite a while, because when I first saw it, there's something just didn't quite set right with me. And it's a combination of the signage, because it reflects one of the buildings that I know that's over in Fountain Valley that I just absolutely detest, because it's just second balcony, sign, lower one, sign on a flat front, and all you see are the signs instead of the building and the architecture. And the building's beautiful. It truly is. But I don't know if it fits in this particular area. If it were more down towards the 405, or was closer to the 241, which are more of a contemporary type setting, I'd say yes. But for me right now, it just doesn't fit right for me.
Okay, does anybody else have any more questions of the applicant, the architect, or would you like to say anything more?
No, we feel that what we've presented is a drastic.
You need to speak right into the microphone because it's being recorded.
We feel what we presented is a drastic upgrade to the center, and it obviously would. It's in need of some TLC. So we can refine some of the elements, but I think what we presented is pretty much what we'd like to pursue.
It's, art is in the eyes of the beholder. It's the same thing with
Or the owner.
Or the owner. Well,
Whomever.
owner, beholder. The owner is yourself, but the community is also a part ownership in that.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to protect.
Okay, thank you. One more question, sorry, from Tom.
Almost let you get away. One of the things I've noticed in frequenting that center is that the traffic all seems to congregate because of the way the driveways work. Almost all the traffic ends up coming up in front of CVS, in front of Ralph's, and this, with Bagels and Brew being there, I was wondering if there's anything you can do to mitigate some of this kind of traffic confusion that exists in that particular area. Because it seems like there's almost like it's a pinch point there between Bagels and Brew where you cross the street to the bank. And I don't know if you're going to look at doing something, as long as you're reworking the landscaping, if you're going to try and improve that parking situation just a little bit, because you see people every once in a while almost having near misses because you got traffic coming in 2 or 3 different directions, and it kind of gets confusing sometimes.
We haven't looked at addressing the major roadways. There is some drastic grade changes right on that major thoroughfare. But we felt with the signage and better placemaking and wayfinding that it should help and relieve some of that. But the roadways haven't been addressed at this point in terms of reconfigurations.
Okay, now I think you're done, almost, maybe. All right, we're going to bring it back up here. And does anybody have comments? More comments?
I think the improvements are long overdue, and I'm really happy with the way it looks, actually. I think it looks great.
Okay, so I like what you've shown us. I think you're saying that when you put in this, that you're kind of keeping with the woodsy thing, and I go to that center 2 or 3 times a week, and it's old and tired. I would imagine that your tenants would want something a little more up to date. And I don't look at that part of Lake Forest as Old Town. And I respect what you're saying about it being next to Heritage Hill, but to me, we have to fight for all of our tax dollars in Lake Forest, and we have to kind of keep up with the Irvines and the Mission Viejos of the world, and that's not Old Town. We don't have an Old Town. And so I like what you're doing. You're keeping a little of it, but you're bringing it up to speed.
If I could tag on to that comment. Most of the people who moved to Lake Forest because it's not like Irvine, and it's not like Mission Viejo. It's more of a friendly feel orientation. What I'm cautioning everyone again about is we have some, what I consider to be historical value in that particular area in just its construct of the natural element and the building configurations that are in there. It's more rural. And I'm just afraid this is too contemporary to put into that area. I like the design, as I say. If it was down in another section of, closer down towards either the 241 or down towards the 405, I would welcome it heartily. But I'm just afraid of losing something that this community has, and if we give it away, it just goes away forever. It never comes back. We'll never be able to recreate it. And that's just a major concern that I have.
Okay, I was just wondering where you get your stats on why everybody moved here, because I don't know where those stats come from.
You can't qualify that, or I don't know how do you quantify it and qualify it. But in discussion and conversation with most people that I have conversations with, they come to Lake Forest for a particular reason. And it's because it is natural. And they like the variation. They like the fact that it's not cookie cutter. And there is a value to that. And this is an aesthetic value. And that's all I'm trying to protect. I would not have removed any of the hills as we did on several of these projects we've had, because they are an aesthetic value that comes with the community, that once it's removed, it's gone. And that's a major concern I have.
Okay. So does anybody else want to weigh in or make a motion?
Yeah, I'll weigh in. I have mixed emotions. One, I'm a little underwhelmed with the design. It seems to be harsh, not warm. But on the other hand, I understand that center's been there a long time, and our city benefits greatly by the modernization and improvement of those properties. And to me, that's kind of an overwhelming plus. That we shouldn't discourage you from going ahead and improving those properties. It's a pretty busy center. It gets a lot of activity, and there's a few unoccupied spaces. So given that, I'm in favor of it.
So in favor, you'd like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion that we approve the documents that staff has recommended.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Let's all vote. Motion carries 4-1. Thank you and congratulations. All right, Gail, I bet you have another item for us.
I do. It's the Amanda Loffer show tonight. Our next item is the plan signing program for an existing Shell gas station on Lake Forest Drive.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. The item before you tonight is a plan sign program for the Shell gas station located at 21762 Lake Forest Drive. It's actually across the street from the Heritage Hill Shopping Center. This plan sign program includes an update to all gas station signage, including a new illuminated canopy band. Pursuant to the municipal code, a plan sign program is required for lighting used for purposes of signage. The plan sign program includes the reface of 3 existing Price Monument signs with LED lighting, the replacement of the Food Mart and Car Wash building wall signage, new fueling dispensers with the updated logos and signage for Shell, replacement of the canopy fascia with the signature Shell colors and illuminated logo, and the addition of an illuminated red canopy band around the entire fueling canopy. The proposed reface modifications to the existing signage are compliant with the regulations in the sign code. The illuminated red canopy band is approximately 6 inches in height and is part of the overall canopy fascia that is approximately 3 feet in height. The illuminated canopy will be lit during night hours and will provide additional lighting for patrons. The illuminated red band is consistent with other illuminated signage on site as well as other gas stations throughout the city. Overall, the plan sign program will help to create a more uniform appearance for the gas station, and staff is recommending approval of this plan sign program. And I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have, and the applicant is also in the audience as well. Thank you.
Thanks again, Amanda. All right, do we have any speakers on this one? We do not. So let's bring it up here. Do we have any questions of staff?
I presume this is the standard corporate shell design for illumination and signage, that they're doing this everywhere?
Yes, and you'll see the next item on the agenda is also for a shell. So they are updating a lot of the
Couldn't you
shell
just
signage.
put ditto, like
Yeah.
in the staff report? It's like, oh, that picture looks familiar.
Yes.
It looks like they've done something very similar, only with shell colors that Chevron was doing. Because I know we did the Chevron with the illuminated band and all that other stuff. It looks like this is just kind of the contemporary thing for gas stations now. So
Yes, that's correct.
I thought it looked pretty good. So.
Okay. So, no speakers, no more questions of staff. We'll bring it up here for discussion or a motion.
Make a motion that we bring it up here and approve staff's recommendation.
I second
And
that.
close the public hearing.
Close the public hearing, sorry.
Second.
And it's been moved and seconded, and let's vote. Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. And I bet we're going to hear from Amanda again.
That's right, and it's another planned sign program for a Shell gas station. This one is on El Toro Road.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. The item before you tonight is a planned sign program for a Shell gas station located at 23852 El Toro Road. This gas station was previously a USA gasoline. This planned sign program includes an update to all gas station signage, including a new illuminated canopy band. And pursuant to the municipal code, a planned sign program is required for lighting used for the purposes of signage. The planned sign program includes a reface of the existing Price Monument sign to an LED sign type, a reface of the existing legal nonconforming freeway sign with no change to the overall structure or square footage, a replacement of the Food Mart signage, new fueling dispensers with new logos and signage for Shell, new canopy fascia including illuminated logos on 3 elevations and an illuminated red canopy band. The proposed reface modifications to the existing signage are compliant with the regulations in the sign code. As described in your staff report, the existing freeway sign is a legal nonconforming sign. The modification to the sign presented in the planned sign program simply includes a reface of the cabinet, and there will be no change in the overall square footage or structure of the sign. The illuminated red canopy band is approximately 6 inches in height and is part of the overall canopy fascia that is approximately 3 feet in height. The illuminated canopy will be lit during night hours and will provide additional lighting for patrons. The illuminated band is consistent with other illuminated signage on site as well as gas stations through the city. And overall, the planned sign program will help to create a more uniform appearance for the gas station, and staff is recommending approval of the planned sign program. I would be happy to answer any other questions that you might have, and the applicant is in the audience. Thank you.
Ding, ding, we have a question.
Just out of curiosity, is that currently a Shell station now and not a USA gas station?
I believe it's USA right now.
Okay, because
It's
that
going
thing's
to
been
be
there for ever and ever, so I hadn't noticed that it had changed. But
yes.
There's a sign there that says the property is owned by Shell.
okay, so it's
It will be changing over to
okay. Great. Just curious.
Any other questions? Okay, let's bring it up here. Discussion. Hearing none.
You said ditto.
Want to close it?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing, bring it back up here, and approve staff's recommendation.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Let's vote. Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, and thank you very much for bringing our Shell gas stations up to date in Lake Forest. Okay, we are done with our items. We're moving on to traffic.
Yes, we are, and I'll introduce Dave Rogers. He's here this evening with a presentation on traffic modeling.
Well, the real brains behind this outfit is the gentleman sitting in the audience there. He's Daryl from Stantec. I'm going to give a very brief presentation. This is one of your educational items as we move forward through all of them. This is the one thing in my field I can claim the least knowledge of. I understand how it what you start with and what comes out, but that black box in between, you actually need people that have a very specific expertise. And so Daryl here with Stantec is the person we brought out tonight. In this case, just real quick, travel demand forecasting is a method used to predict future traffic conditions in an area, city, or region. This is done to identify where traffic condition on roadways or at intersections will exceed the level of service threshold established by the responsible agency. This information is then used to devise a capital improvement program to address the deficiencies. Our model is called the Lake Forest Traffic Model, or LIFTAM, L-F-T-A-M, and it was created in conjunction with the OSA. The rezoning obviously altered trip generation and travel patterns, which required development of a new model to determine the impacts and mitigations. Stantec Engineering has developed and maintains the model for the city and makes the updates for us as necessary. In fact, we're doing some updates as we speak based on some changed conditions. Our mitigation program is known as the Lake Forest Traffic Mitigation Program, or LIFTAM. I wasn't here when these things were presented. I probably would have written them differently because I even get confused, the TAMs and the TUMs in this one. But that is our program. It is funded by the OSA developments. The list currently contains 15 locations that need improvement on or before the horizon year of 2030. And at this time, we've completed 4 of the 15 improvements. Actually 2 in Lake Forest and 2 in Laguna Hills. So you've got your modeling, which creates your deficiencies, and your deficiencies are addressed by a program, and that program is currently moving forward with a horizon of 2030. That's about everything I know. So now I'm going to turn it over to Daryl, who has a presentation for you tonight, and obviously will be here to answer any questions that you might have about this topic.
Well, thank you. Would you be able to hear me from here? Or?
Do we need him recorded for your...
Can I move up?
I can move.
Okay. That would work.
I know. That was a clever exit.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. Like Dave said, my name is Daryl Zerfus. I'm a traffic engineer and a transportation planner with Stantec, and for the past several years, I have been working with and helping the city's public works department with the operation of the city's traffic model. And my goal with this presentation here tonight is to give you kind of a high-level overview of just what a traffic model is, how it works, the key inputs and outputs that come from a traffic model, and hopefully give you a little bit of pull back the curtain a bit, and this will help. This will aid you when you have as projects come before you and be able to review the traffic study and just have a little bit of understanding about how those traffic forecasts come about that you see in these traffic studies. So when just starting off big picture, what is a traffic model? Think of it as just it's a computerized database, the purpose of which is to use a specific set of inputs to forecast travel behavior. The traffic model uses some certain key inputs. Most important to a traffic model is land use data. A model needs information about the roadway network. It also needs information about travel patterns. And in the case of travel patterns, we get that information from the OCTA. The OCTA maintains think of it as a much bigger traffic model that operates at the regional scale, whereas the Lake Forest model is scaled to the city level. The OCTA model is a regional model, and it provides those regional travel patterns that are then fed directly into the Lake Forest model. And like anything, a model is only as the outputs are only as good as the inputs. So it's very important to have a high-level, high-quality land use information to feed into the model, and very detailed roadway information from the model. And then the outputs that you get from a model, it's like what you see in the traffic studies that come before you. There's the daily traffic volumes, the ADT volumes for roadways. There's a lot more detailed peak hour information, specific turning movement volumes at intersections. And then there's something that's called vehicle miles of travel, and or VMT. And VMT is something you're going to be hearing about a lot more coming up. There are some pending changes to CEQA that are going to make, or that do make, VMT a required part of any CEQA analysis. So over the next couple of years, VMT is going to be showing up more and more in your traffic studies until that time when it becomes a required component of CEQA analysis. So getting a little bit more into the specifics of the Lake Forest model and some of these key inputs. As it relates to land use data, this might look a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, but what this actually is the city is divided up into about 110 zones. They're called traffic analysis zones, or TAZs. And for each TAZ, the model maintains a database of land use information. And so for each TAZ, if it's a zone that has residential uses, it will have the types of residential. Is it single family, or is it apartment or condominiums? It'll have the number of units of each. If it's a zone that has a shopping center in it, it'll have the square footage of the shopping center. If there's a school, it'll have the type of school and the number of students at the school. And that's the land use information that's used in the trip generation process. And in regard to the highway network is set up. It consists of all the arterials in the city and the surrounding areas, most of the more significant collector streets, the freeways and the toll road, of course. What it does not have are the local streets. The traffic model does not have a level of detail to be able to address traffic at the local street level. It's really just dealing with the arterials, the collectors, and then the more regional freeways and tollway. So now to get into a little bit more of the details how the traffic model actually works. It is, like Dave said, there's a lot of magic there, but again, try to maybe open it up so it's a little less mysterious. There's 4 basic steps in the traffic modeling process. The first is trip generation. Calculates at the traffic zone level how many trips are being created in each zone. Then there's the trip distribution step. After the model knows how many trips are generated, it then calculates where those trips are going. That's the distribution. Then there's a step called mode choice, and that is simply referring to the method that is being used to make the trip. If it's a trip that's being made by train or by car or a trip by bus. And for the Lake Forest model, we actually have the opportunity, we take a shortcut here. The Lake Forest model doesn't do a mode choice step. It relies, again, on the OCTA parent model for all the mode choice information. So in the case of the Lake Forest model, when it's doing step 1 and 2, the trip generation, trip distribution, that's entirely vehicle trips. And then it goes to the 4th step, which is route choice, which you can think of that as it is calculated where the trips are going, then it has to calculate how they get there. So that refers to the specific route or specific path that each trip takes to its destination. So a little bit of detail with each of these steps. The trip generation step is a lot like you've probably seen in the traffic studies that are being processed through the city. The land use is used with standard trip generation rates to calculate trips. But there's one thing a traffic model does that you won't see in a regular traffic study. It's also calculating what are called trip purposes. So it's not enough for a traffic model to know how many trips there are. it also has to know what the purpose of each trip is. And the common trip purposes are trips from home to work, or trips from home to shopping, or home to school. And it uses those trip purposes. That's a key part of the next step, the trip distribution, because the purpose defines some of the key parts of the distribution of trips. One of the most important parts of that, it has to do with the length of a trip. Certain trips, like trips to the school or trips from home to school, will generally be short trips. Not all of them, of course, but most of the home to school trips are short. They're going to the neighborhood school. But a trip for work is much different. Those have completely different characteristics. So the home to work trips are distributed by the model differently. There's and again, this is where it goes back to the OCTA model, and it's relying on the regional trip distribution patterns of home to work type of trip patterns. So some work trips are going to be local, from residents in Lake Forest to the employment nearby. There's a little longer trips, to Irvine, but it also is able to address the very long trips. Even certain trips, people will go 40, 50 miles for some of their commute. So the model is able to address all of that. And then the next step, the trip assignment, it's like I mentioned before, after it calculates the distribution of the trips, it has to figure out the exact path that each trip is going to take. And it does this in I call it an iterative process, because it needs to take into account congestion. It starts off, trips, basic premise is people will take the fastest route to their destination. But the fastest route at 11 a.m. isn't necessarily the fastest route at 5 p.m. because traffic volumes, the more volume there is on a road, the slower the speeds come. So the model takes an incremental approach, continually recalculating speeds as the traffic volumes build up, and that way allows for traffic patterns to act more like people do and avoid congestion or change their routes to go to take a faster route if it experiences congestion. So then a question that we're asked a lot is, how accurate is a traffic model, or how do you know if a traffic model is accurate? And to determine accuracy, you have to be able to measure against something, measure against a known quantity. So to do that, before a traffic model is ever used to try to model or predict a future condition, a base year version of the model is always developed, one that is a model that is trying to reflect existing conditions so that the model can then be compared and tested against actual traffic counts as they are on the ground today. So the base year model will start off with there's a calibration and validation process that goes through where the output of the model is compared to traffic counts. There's adjustments and fine-tuning that can be done to make the model match existing counts as close as based on established tolerances. And then once that's established, all those adjustments are locked in place. They're not touched again. And then the model is able to be used for what you really want a model for, which is to try to forecast or show what will happen in the future if certain things change. So it's really limited to just adjusting those key parameters again. Land use information, roadway changes, a change in land. What the model will do is it tells you if you make a change to the land use, how does the traffic react? How do traffic patterns change? How do traffic volumes change? Similar with the roadway. If the roadway is widened, more lanes are added, or new roadway is built, the model will then react to that and demonstrate how traffic volumes change because of that. The output that you get, it's like what you'll see in the traffic study at this point. This is your roadway volumes, your intersection volumes, which are used to measure level of service, the factors that are used in the traffic study. So what it comes to, traffic volume, there's not much to look at with a traffic model. It's mostly a computer database. But what the traffic model will be able to tell you this is a zoomed in on a portion of the roadway network. When the model does its forecast, it's calculating traffic. I didn't mention it does it for multiple time periods of the day. It does a AM peak assignment. It does a separate assignment of the PM peak traffic because there's different traffic patterns in the different times of the day. So the models the different times of the day separately and then adds it all together for your daily traffic. The model produces the volumes for every roadway link, as well as the intersections where it produces the actual estimates of the turning movements at all the major intersections in the city. And I think that was pretty much it. So now, just any questions you have. Less detail, more detail. I'll try my best to answer it.
Just a couple. So when you're talking about the people going to work, that kind of thing, how does that data collected? I mean, how do we know if somebody's going 5 miles to work or 10 miles to work or 100 miles to work, and why do we care? I mean, how do they verify that? And then, so I guess that would be my first question.
The information, there's a couple different sources for that, and it comes from the higher levels of government. There's census data. There's something called the American Community Survey, which is collecting data at census tract level. The other agencies, like the Southern California Association of Governments, does a lot of research, and I had mentioned OCTA has a larger regional model. Well, the Association of Governments has an even larger model than that. That's looking at the entire Southern California region. And even Caltrans has a model for the entire state that is looking at things like, takes into account interstate travel and shipping and things like that. And each model, information from each level of model kind of feeds into the next level down. So like with Lake Forest, we're relying on the survey information, which goes into the OCTA model, and then we pull data from there to get our travel patterns. And the reason it's important is because when it comes to traffic congestion, obviously the number of trips that there are is a big part of that, but the length of trips is just as important, because the longer people drive on average, that's more cars on the road, or cars are on the road longer, and car trips overlap more, and you end up with more traffic, more congestion at any given location, as opposed to having, the ideal situation whenever people only have to make short trips, they don't overlap with each other as much, and it doesn't create as much congestion.
Of course, it'd be in our city longer, so if they got longer trips, they're out of it, and we don't have to worry about it. But anyway, that's a whole other issue. So regarding forecasting, so for instance, somebody, a developer wants to develop a new housing development, or, we're going through this thing at, Nikasi Nursery, that whole big area there with, X amount of houses. Is there a specific formula that you can, that you use, to determine, our roads can handle that, or no, we'll have to do that? I mean, I know our staff has to be concerned with that kind of stuff before they approve a project. So just briefly, is there a specific formula that you use for something like that?
Yeah, the traffic model's producing the traffic numbers, the volume of cars, and then there are formulas that are used with the roadway to see if the roads can, how well they can actually accommodate that traffic at a much more precise level than what the traffic model does. The traffic model looks at, like I mentioned, it addresses congestion at kind of a high level, but then there are formulas that it relates to, which it's called level of service, and the city has standards or criteria for certain levels of service that are considered acceptable versus level of service that's considered not acceptable.
And so for our purposes, by the time it gets to us, all that stuff has been considered, presented to staff. We've gone through all the models, and since we can assume that since it's been presented to us, they've already dealt with the potential traffic, and it looks like that'll be okay, I guess, would be.
I'm sorry, Gerald. The answer is yes. Staff works with consultants like Stantec. Obviously, the developers themselves hire their own engineers to produce their traffic studies, which are based on our models. We typically back-check them with our consultants to make sure we're comfortable with their assumptions and numbers and other things, and even all the way down to their proposed mitigations. Whatever it is. But yes, you can be assured that all of that goes through a pretty rigorous staff and consultant level review process before we present recommendations and findings to you.
Yeah, when we did El Toro Road, they used, this is static data, so it's all this. They had a program that they showed us when we were looking at the design for El Toro Road that actually had the flow, and they were actually able to demonstrate that. Will we be able to have access to that when we start reviewing, depending upon who's doing the study, I guess, I don't know. But we were actually to determine, to see the little dots showing how many cars are making right-hand turns that were within the traffic control system.
That's a different kind of, it's correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but it's like synchro modeling. Mm-hmm. It's a specific type of modeling down to almost to the vehicle level, and it is attempts to kind of show you in theory, in kind of real time in motion, what it's going to look like. That is not something that would typically be part of kind of what Darrell is doing. That's something that you can ask, and it's always typically, it's a developer to present some information if you want to get to kind of that visual level. You can certainly take whatever data they have and put it into that modeling system to create those kinds of displays for you. The last time we used it here was actually from a council request for what might happen if we made some changes at Bake and Trabuco, and we used the synchro model there as a good visual for them to understand and see, if you do this, what happens? If you do this, what happens? And so we use it for staff level where we think it's appropriate, but it's something that takes time, effort, and money, so you want to make sure you use it when you need to use it, but it certainly is a valuable tool in the right circumstances. On El Toro Road, I wasn't here obviously, but if they did one for an El Toro Road widening that project through there, it would have been a spectacular visual in terms of what you could see, what it used to look like, and what it was going to look like. It
was exceptional, especially at El Toro Road and Rockfield and the freeway interchange. Exactly. To actually see how traffic flow would be facilitated by the modifications we were making. So it would be something that I think would be extremely beneficial when we start looking at a high impact project, okay, in an area that we know we've got concern for traffic. That it eliminated a lot of questions as far as people could actually see, well, there's car A, B, and C, here's how they turn, here's how they stop. They even had pedestrians going across the crossway. So it actually gave you a real-time sense as to what was going on. I found it extremely valuable.
You talked about two things that were of interest to me. You talked about how you calibrate the traffic model. Can you go into a little more detail about how that calibration works?
Yeah, because that's one of the most important parts of the modeling process, but it's the part that is seen the least because once the calibration's done, then the model is just used for the forecasting. But so the calibration process, so again, it's a special version or a unique version of the model that is developed to match the built environment as it is today. So the land use database reflects what's built and on the ground today. The roadway network reflects the way the roads are built and configured today. And then the model produces, we wouldn't really call them forecasts because it's an existing condition, but the model produces output, traffic volume output, that is compared to the traffic counts that we collect on the streets, the tubes that you see put across the street that are counting cars, or the process for counting the turning movements at intersections. All that actual real world data is compared to what the model is estimating. And there are criteria that comes from guidelines produced by the FHWA at the federal level, as well as the OCTA has their own criteria that says how close a model needs to be able to match those counts to be considered acceptable.
Do they consider that as a percentage, or do they have some other type of criteria? I'm kind of curious how close you have to get to say that the model is actually what you would call a calibration.
There are various statistics, but at a percentage level, just in general, it's looked at different detail at the kind of at the big picture, which is the general movement, not at an individual roadway or specific location, but just as it comes to the volume of traffic flowing in and out of the city. That asks, the standards are generally needed to be less within 10% of each other, but we always achieve better than that. I went back and checked the validation report for Lake Forest, which was prepared a while ago, but that level of detail was within less than 1%. There's less than 1% difference at that level. I think it was 0.8%. Then there's another level of analysis where you're looking at, it's called a screen line. It's like if you drew a line on the map, all of the cars passing that screen line. And that, for this model, is generally within plus or minus 5% of accuracy. And then when it comes to specific roadway locations, it's a little harder to state a specific number because the criteria varies depending upon how much traffic is on the road. Roadway segments that carry a lot of traffic, you need to be a lot more precise on a percentage basis. A small volume road that carries only a couple thousand cars, if you're plus or minus 500 cars on that, it doesn't really make a big difference in operations. But on a heavy roadway, you need to be within a few percent. And so most road on a segment by segment location, the model's usually within plus or minus 10% of the count.
That's more accurate than I would have expected.
Not every location is able to get that exact, but there's actually another process, another step I didn't get into that the model does. It's called post-processing. And what that does is it's actually incorporates the traffic counts into the process. And so that kind of smooths out those locations that didn't calibrate right, because the model is making an adjustment based on the actual measured count. So that kind of helps smooth out and fix those locations that didn't calibrate as well.
So how often do you have to repeat a traffic count in order to maintain the accuracy of the model?
Well, it depends on how much change is occurring. For built out, communities that are mostly built out and don't see a lot of change, they don't need to be recalibrated very often. Cities that are growing, experiencing a lot of change, need recalibration on a much more regular basis, to keep up with things that change. So the OCTA will recalibrate their model about every 5 years. It's basically a rolling program, and it takes them about 5 years to do it. So as soon as they finish one, they pretty much start the next one, and then it takes 5 years to do it.
Thank you.
Just really, I'm kind of old school where they had the old traffic counts or the rubber thing across the road, or they had a guy sitting in it with an umbrella and a chair counting cars going by. But how are we doing traffic counts now, or just briefly? Is there a satellite thing, or how do we do that?
It's still tubes. You will see them quite often out there. For intersection counts, it's pretty rare to see the human being out there now. You can set up temporary video cameras that can be counted in they're still counted manually, right?
Some of them are, but there's also computer programs
that can do them now. So yeah. So and unfortunately, that's not going to be a job for any of us going forward here. I'm afraid we're out of business on that one. But so yeah, it's gotten a little more sophisticated, but it's there's no substitute for physically counting what's going on out there in the real world sometimes. And they said that's why it's important to get those counts so that when you are updating the model or post-processing, as he's talking about, it's another check against what's really happening out there. And the city council has put together a small amount, not a lot of money, about $20,000 a year to kind of help us just do some sampling of updating of some of our counts at our intersections, just for that very purpose, to kind of make sure our model is on track. Also to pick up any potential sudden increases, sudden is a relative word, but sudden increases at an intersection that might direct us to move one of our projects up sooner rather than waiting. We kind of have a schedule where we've kind of got it spread out over the next wherever we're at, 12 years. But the project in year 10, because of a count, might say, you know what, I think we need that sooner, and we prioritize it differently. So that's kind of what we're doing at the city level to try and make sure our projects are moving forward when they should.
Do you use this information to work on traffic signal synchronization and things like that? Does any of this data affect any of how you deal with traffic synchronization? And
Not so much the model forecasts. Synchronization is done using the traffic counts, so that's based on what's actually happening, what the traffic conditions are today, which is why the traffic signals have to be timing has to be redone periodically, because as the traffic volumes change, then that has to be changed to go with it.
Okay, any more questions?
Can I just ask one?
Sure.
I
We're
figured
still
that-
going to hear from the public too, just FYI.
All right, I understand that. Since it's within the report, I assume we can ask questions on it, and that's the mitigation program itself. You got two of them that I'm curious about as to where we're at in the process, because I think we've mentioned them. There was number 5 and number 9. 5 being Lake Forest and Rockfield, and number 9 being the Bake Trabuco. Where are we at with those? And I know because there's some hot button issues that we probably have there.
Lake Forest and Rockfield, the actual proposed mitigation is to relatively simple. It's to change the operation on Rockfield from its current, what I will call a typical signal operation where the left turns are separate from the throughs, and turn it into split phase, so we can add another left coming off northbound Rockfield. I'm just not comfortable doing that right now. I think that's why we're kind of waiting for that one a little bit. Part of what we do and can do when Daryl works with us on this, sometimes we'll test different, like what if we didn't do that? What might happen? Did something change? Did something blow up? Is there an alternative improvement that possibly could be considered? So any of these that look uncomfortable, and I'll throw them, something like that, a fairly dramatic change out there, you typically have to eliminate one of the crosswalks across Lake Forest to retain some sort of efficiency. And honestly, I'm really leery about doing that so close to the freeway. I don't want to be, known as the guy who created the signal alert every day because he changed the signal operation. So that one's kind of over here somewhere, and we're looking at that. Bake Trabuco is a whole nother beast. You are probably aware that the council wanted the city to put in a temporary change out there that would now provide a dedicated right turn lane eastbound Bake coming in to turn onto Trabuco. That project is out to bid right now. So we expect to get bids shortly, probably about a 2 to 3 month construction window. So summer-ish, that one will be in. That is considered temporary. That actually is not even part of this program. This future program actually calls for different improvements out there. A second left turn lane, eastbound Bake to northbound, it's Irvine Boulevard at that point. A fourth through lane on Trabuco. I call them the cheater lanes. Not a big fan of them, but they work from a capacity standpoint. The calculations work. So we've kind of got it broken down now into the temporary project, and then we're going to come back at a later date with the future project, with the future project having the goal of retaining that dedicated right turn lane as part of it. I think we all agree that that's a good improvement. And so that is the ultimate fix out there, now includes keeping that dedicated right turn lane.
I think it was covered. I have a hard time reading the shorthand here on the improvements. So EBL is eastbound lane. All right.
Or eastbound left,
I'm
depending
not
on.
the only one. Thank you.
There's a couple here that I didn't get.
I'm sorry, that's engineering ease there. Yeah,
Okay.
you know we love acronyms and stuff.
Okay. All right. I think that conversation cleared it up.
Okay.
All right, we have Heiko.
Commissioner Heiko Peschel for Perel Foothill Ranch. I got a whole bunch of things. Now, these gentlemen, and I appreciate what Daryl and David have done, are looking at it from the top down. I, as a driver, I'm looking at it from the bottom up. Reference to some of the things, Trabuco and El Toro, Trabuco and Bake, there are 2 left turns south on Bake going to Trabuco, and there's 1 left turn lane north on Bake going left to Irvine Boulevard. There's Irvine Boulevard and Irvine Avenue, and I can always get them confused. If those were modified somewhat, I think we could give that dedicated right turn lane onto Trabuco without any major changes, just by removing one of the southbound left turn lanes and moving the center median over a little bit. Neither here nor there. That's just the beginning. One of my major concerns is, and I don't know, and I'd have to ask the gentleman, are the left turn signals variable according to demand, or are they fixed?
We're not going to be taking questions
Okay,
right now.
that's a question for them, because I have noticed, for example, let's go down here. Well, let's see, Portola and Town Center. Town Center has a green light that lasts a lot longer than it seems to me to be needed for the when I'm going through there. Also, when you're going west or whatever direction you want to call it on Portola, that left turn light stays on green a lot longer than there seems to be any demand for it. If you're coming from El Toro on Portola and you want to cut left on Town Center, you do that right there before you get to Lake Forest and cut over, and that one stays green. The other one, Portola and Bake, if you're coming down Bake Parkway, coming out of the shopping center and then turning, that left turn light seems to stay green a lot longer than it should be. Those are just a couple, and Mr. Rogers has asked me to send him some of my concerns, and I'll do that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so with that, we want to thank both Dave and our guest tonight for giving us quite a lesson. Thank you very much. And Gail, does that really conclude that presentation?
Yes, that's all we have.
Wait.
One last question. What's the status of the concept for Interstate 5 and El Toro Road new access ramps?
We're still narrowing down. We're in the project development phase right now, and we are looking at several alternatives. It started at about 16 or 20 alternatives, and it's down to about 3 or 4 right now that the team is studying. And then there will ultimately be a preferred option chosen from that, and that will be the one that will proceed. It won't proceed without the cities are all involved: Laguna Hills, Laguna Woods, Lake Forest, because it affects all 3 of us in that, depending on the configuration and the design. So we've been intimately involved in the process, and so we have the interests, of course, the city and the residents at hand. They're trying to come up with the best solution for that one. So it's a ways off. It's going to come after the freeway widening, and we all know that doesn't start for a while, and that's probably 5 years. So anyway, 2030 maybe we'll get that time.
We don't drive cars.
Yeah, that's
There you go.
Or we won't. Yeah, we won't actually be driving. We'll be riding in the cars, not driving the cars. Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, with that, thank you very much. We'll close that presentation, and we will ask our director for her comments.
I only have one comment this evening. Our next meeting, which is scheduled for January 25th, right now our agenda is very light. So I'll let you know if for some reason that meeting is canceled and we move into February. But at the present time, it's looking very light.
Thank you.
No comment.
No comment from the city attorney. All right, I'll start, and I am unable to be at the January 25th meeting, so that would be fine for me if it was canceled, because I'm on a bucket list quest that week to see the Sundance Film Festival. So that took precedence over the Planning and Traffic Commission. Oh, my. But again, thank you for your great presentation. Thank you, Amanda. I hope your parents enjoyed it. And we'll start down here with Dave.
I have no comments.
I appreciate your presentation tonight on the traffic modeling. That was very interesting. And again, thanks you to the staff for doing such a good job. Amanda, as always, you did very well. Thank you.
I don't have any comment.
Staff, job well done.